Hi, my name's Anisha and welcome back to my channel. This past Tuesday, it was my mom's birthday, so I decided to make her a cake and I documented the whole process, so let's get into it. To start, I made a cherry jam to use to color some of the whipped cream. I made this the day before just to make sure it was totally chilled before adding it to the whipped cream. Looking like so far. I think it's cooked down enough because I only need like 1.5 teaspoons because it's gonna go in the whipped cream. So I think cooking it down this much, it should be good. Oh, my arm hurts from holding this. This is the finished jam. It is pretty thick. I think it will also thicken up a bit more when I let it sit in the fridge overnight. Then the next day I got started on the actual cake. I wrote the recipe in a notebook since I was using my phone to record. Otherwise, I probably just would have looked at the recipe online. I started by combining the dry ingredients. I'll leave the recipe that I was following in the description, and that'll have all of the measurements and all of the exact ingredients. Once I whisked together the dry ingredients, I creamed my butter. I was trying to cream the butter at the table, but my cord wasn't long enough, so I actually had to change positions back to my countertop, which was closer to the outlet. Then I added in my sugar and creamed everything together. I could only find my 1/4 cup measure, so it took a while to measure it all out. Once I creamed that together, I added in my eggs, beating after each one. Since everything was mixed together, I added in some vanilla extract and mixed that in with a spatula. Then I alternated adding in the dry mixture and the milk. The recipe said to start and end with the dry ingredients, but I have no clue what difference that makes. Once my batter was done, I prepped my pans with some butter. I learned this trick where you can just use the leftover butter on the wrapper to grease your pans, and it worked well. My cakes didn't stick to the pan when I was taking them out. Now that my batter is done and my pans are prepped, I divided my batter equally between my 2 pans and then spread it out. Then I popped my cakes into the oven and I baked them for about 25 minutes. It's been 25 minutes and the cakes are done baking. While my cakes are cooling, I'm going to start making the whipped cream. I started by whipping about 3/4 of a cup of heavy whipping cream. Once that was frothy, I added 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar and a splash of vanilla extract, and then I whipped that until it was thick. Then I did basically the same thing, except this time I used less heavy cream and I used the cherry jam since I wanted this one to be colored. I added in the cherry jam at basically the same time I added in the powdered sugar and vanilla extract last time. Look at this color, it looks so pretty. I just flipped the cakes out of the pan and they look perfect. The final thing I needed to prep was the strawberries. I wanted a thin layer of strawberries in between the cake. Once everything was prepped, I could finally start assembling and decorating the cake. I started out by doing a thin layer of whipped cream on the first cake. Once that was done, I added my strawberries. Then I did another layer of whipped cream on top of the strawberries before adding the second cake. Then it was time to frost the outside of the cake, and it took me so long. It probably took me around 20 minutes just to do that. I wish I worked as fast as I did in this video. Then I tried to make a star tip out of a Ziploc and it worked okay with the whipped cream. I think you would have been able to see the design a bit more if I used a thicker frosting like buttercream. I used that piping bag or Ziploc bag to do a nice little border around the cake with the purple frosting. So this is what it looked like after I added the border, and it looked a bit plain, so I decided to add in some writing. My mom actually took over and wrote on top of it. I just added in all the parts. Here's a cross section of what the cake looks like on the inside. I think it definitely needed some simple syrup on top because it was a bit dry, so it absorbed the whipped cream that I put on top of it. It still tasted good. Overall, the whole process of making the cake wasn't too hard. It tasted pretty good and I'm really happy with how it looked and how it turned out. That brings us to the end of this video and I'll see you guys next time.